The topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the host and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization Show, the home of Googlization Nation, where we talk with HR and business thought leaders about the crazy shift going on in the world of business, technology, and HR. Here's your host, Ira Wolf, and co-host Keith Campagna.
Hey, welcome back, Googlization Nation. What a crazy week. When you talk about, VUCA, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity, disruptions seems to be all around us. We've got the impeachment going on with certainly its share of drama and disruption. We've got the uncertainty of a coronavirus going around the world, pretty scary stuff. We got a volatile stock market this week. During the week, reacts one day like the end is near and then rebounds the next. And then we've had the unfortunate passing of two massively influential people in our lives. We had the tragic death, unexpected death, way too early of Kobe Bryant. Certainly, a legend in not only an athlete, but really, helping the community. And you can just turn on the news and see how he impacted so many lives. But just a few days earlier than that, we had the passing of Clayton Christensen. Some of you may not be familiar with him. He was the author of The Innovator's Dilemma. It's a book about 23 years ago, still one of the most popular business books of all time, influenced a lot of people. He's known as the father of disruptive innovation. And that's what we're going to talk about today. That, we can talk about, certainly Kobe, maybe another time. We'll talk about leadership. And certainly he was on that edge of Gen X and millennials and, certainly didn't fit the stereotype of what they said about either of those generations. But today we're going to talk about, we're going to be really focused on Dr. Clay Christensen, who impacted the lives of millions of people through businesses and also personally. He's a very spiritual and religious man. So I reached out to the network to kind of hear firsthand from someone, and graciously Carlos Castelan, who was a former student of Dr. Christensen at Harvard Business School, is going to join us. And Carlos was the founder, or is the founder, of the Navio group. You'll hear a little bit more about that. And as I said, his life and career were enormously impacted, as he'll share, from just meeting and learning from Clay Christensen. So he'll join us in just a minute. Keith, any thoughts?
It's tragic and it's unfortunate, and it's also amazing to see the way that Kobe and Clay essentially combined this reality of hard work with human potential. And, all you have to do is check out YouTube to hear and be reminded of all the amazing things that Kobe Bryant has done and his philosophy as it relates to just working hard and being smart about it. And then Clay, whose focus wasn't just on being an innovation disruptor inside of a business context, but his belief systems as it relates to who you are as a person far exceeded, as far as I could tell, far exceeded what he's done on an innovation disruption level. And he's done a whole lot in that regard. So I'm just like the rest of us this week, Ira. I'm kind of sitting back and taking it in and appreciating the people the information we have access to and learning about, what's to come.
Yeah, and we definitely want to spend a lot of time with Carlos, so we're going to kind of cut short our intro here and really just jump into it. But before I do that, I want to thank Zor.ai and Success Performance Solutions again for being sponsors of the show. Really help us get to you and be able to share some of these great guests and our continual learning. I don't know. hopefully our listeners are getting as much out of this as you and I are, Keith. Please make sure you go up to Googleization Nation and sign up for notices about upcoming shows, past shows, invitation to some webinars that we're planning, live streams, and a lot more to come. And the second edition of my book next Tuesday. It's officially out, but you can order a free copy today. You can go to join.googlizationnation.com. That's join.googlizationnation.com. You get the print copy won't be available for a few weeks, but you'll immediately get a digital copy. So appreciate that. We're going to take a real quick break here, and we're going to hear from one of our sponsors. And then we'll be right back with Carlos Castelan, and we're going to be talking about disruptive innovation and Clayton Christensen.
Imagine how your company would grow if your candidate experience earned a 99% approval rating. Well, to get to 99%, you need the 3 best letters in recruitment technology, XOR. Zoar's text bots, chat bots, and audio bots increased IKEA's candidate conversion rate 455%. Zoar decreases candidate drop-off rates, improves your candidate experience, and collects analytics for future strategies. To learn more, check out Zoar.ai. That's XOR.ai.
Last week on Friday, we had the passing of a legend in the business world, Dr. Clayton Christensen. Many of you may have read his book, not written it, but read his book, Innovator's Dilemma. I think it was out about 1997. It really is sort of the Bible of innovation and understanding, why successful companies, very, very successful companies, such as like a Sears. Why didn't Sears become the first Amazon of the world? It really was the first Amazon in the world. They had a catalog, but why weren't they able to change? And so he studied that. And so what I did was, with his passing, I reached out the other day to a network and asked for anybody whose personal life or businesses were impacted by his model, his theories, his teaching, or him personally. And we graciously had a gentleman by the name of Carlos Castelan contact us, and he's our guest today. So welcome to the show, Carlos.
Hi, Ron, Keith. It's a pleasure to speak with you today.
And thanks. I really appreciate you being here. So you're a fairly recent grad of Harvard Business School, where Dr. Christensen taught. You took classes with him, and right before we got on, you were sharing a little bit of a story of how the impact that he's having on today's businesses. You literally are a student. I can say I've studied Dr. Christensen, but I've read his books and followed him for years. But you literally are a student of his.
Absolutely, yeah. So I had the privilege of taking a class from him my second year of business school. And, it was one of the few years, I think, since he, had come back to school that he actually taught a semester with sort of the full-time MBA. So it was a real privilege for me to be able to take that class. And I think, what most stands out, I would say, about him in particular is obviously he was a brilliant sort of management thinker, had these great theories. But I think the piece to me that I most remember about him was really about thinking about the purpose of life. And I think for a room full of 20-year-old people that are ambitious, that are there obviously because they want to advance their learning and improve their careers. I think thinking about that purpose, I think was really important. So he had written a piece and that's accessible to everyone. It's in the Harvard Business Review, and it's entitled, "How Will You Measure Your Life?" And that piece is actually from, essentially a write-up of the speech that he gave the graduating class of 2010. And I think what it does is it really is a direct reflection of his own values and the person that he was, and encouraging everyone in that room to think about that purpose. And I know, we didn't really talk about this, but I really think about it in relation to, another person that passed away recently here, Kobe Bryant. And he definitely found that purpose, I think, after basketball. For such a long time, he was a fierce competitor and did that. But at the end of the day, I think people when they think about him over the last couple of days, they really talk about that, his role as a father, as a mentor, and all the people that he touched, both in basketball and sort of in his personal life. And I think that ultimately, at the end of the day, is just as important as sort of the management piece of, Clay Christensen or anywhere else that you might be doing, business, athletics, anywhere else.
Yeah. And from a quote, I mean, just to give people, if they're not familiar with Dr. Christensen or the How Will You Measure Your Life, which was, again, another reason that I wanted to kind of touch with you, because obviously that impressed you, that affected you. A quote from that presentation and article was, "Doing deals doesn't yield the deep rewards that come up from building up people." There seems to be a disconnect when we talk about disruption and innovation and people. Because one of my keynotes, one of my book, it talks about the displacement of people. And the displacement of people comes from innovation. And it's certainly disruptive in our lives. And then yet we're talking about building up people. Maybe we can go back a little bit and get your kind of brief description for people who don't know what disruptive innovation is. And that may kind of, that will hopefully lead into how that, how you can do that and also lead with purpose. So let's go back to, how would you define disruptive innovation?
Absolutely. So, I think there's a lot of, I think the term disruption oftentimes gets thrown around, oftentimes today in relation to innovation. But I think Clay Christensen, sort of the key point about disruption theory for him, and he had cited, a myriad of examples on this, was disruption is essentially about going after non-consumption or low consumption in a market. So when a company has matured and has high margins, it's going after the biggest clients, there leaves sort of this vacuum underneath that to go after smaller businesses, medium-sized businesses, and to really build from the ground up. And then at a time when, eventually you start picking up those smaller clients, you eventually grow, and then you disrupt the incumbents sort of on the high end. So he had, a litany of examples that he used. And I think, to go back to your thinking about Sears, I think the way to think about that, if you were to apply Clay Christensen's framework around disruption, is to say, Sears was obviously this legacy player. And I looked it up the other day, it was crazy. We think about the last decade. Well, they were at $45 billion in revenue in 2010, which is just crazy. They were on the Fortune 100. So,
right.
Obviously
they had 360,000 employees.
Yeah. And that they disappeared basically in the space of 10 years. And I think they were sort of, if you think about them, they had a catalog business that obviously had been their legacy business. That's where they made their money. But Amazon came in and figured out a way to say, well, there's this segment of the population that we're not serving around catalogs. We're going to leverage the technology, the internet. And so they started out just, selling books online, which was obviously very niche. And it's the people that maybe otherwise couldn't find those books at their local bookstore. And so they kind of opened this up. And so as a result, they picked off these customers, started building off a base, and obviously grew that over time. And it's a little bit more complex than that, obviously, specifically to Sears, because Amazon wasn't necessarily a direct competitor of Sears. But there were several businesses.
Walmart came along. I mean, in the 80s. Well, they've been around since the 60s, but in 1990, I think it was 90 or 91, they surpassed Sears. So they became their big competitor. And so the question is why wasn't Walmart the next Amazon as well?
Yeah, exactly. I think, and so that thinking about sort of the non-consumption or low consumption and starting from there and growing, I think is something that we always talk about with our clients today. What are opportunities that maybe you're not going after because they're lower margin opportunities, but someone else might come in and take that from you and eventually grow the business because they're able to refine, gather customers. And by the time you're able to do it, it's too late. I think, another great example of this is Netflix and Blockbuster. Blockbuster had a great model. It was super profitable for them to invest in sort of the DVD rental business, through mail order. Just wasn't going to happen. It wasn't as profitable for them. And so you have all these disincentives oftentimes for companies to do that. And Clay, I think, was great about being able to point that out through his management theory to say, consider some of these opportunities, even if they're not the same margin. How do you go after them and then innovate to build businesses off of them so that it's not some other player that's coming after you.
Can you give an example of another situation where there's low-hanging fruit or there's a low consumption market that somebody can pick up? I'm trying to make this real for people, that rather than making it more academic, that they kind of something they can relate to. So is there another example you've got?
Yeah, absolutely. So, one of the ones I think that most has impacted, me and my career, about a year before I graduated business school, a business started up out of Harvard Business School called Hourly Nerd. It's now called Castelan. 5 years later, they've rebranded. But that business was founded essentially on a lot of the premises, the premise of Clayton Christensen's disruption theory. So what the business was essentially connecting, at that time, MBAs that had downtime to, small and medium-sized businesses in the area that maybe needed some consulting help, help around sort of financial planning, accounting, basic skills that I think, maybe those entrepreneurs, didn't have time to get around, or maybe hadn't been, hadn't essentially focused on in their career. And so they could bring in MBAs sort of at a reasonable rate and get that support on a part-time basis rather than needing to hire someone full-time. And I know that was sort of at the start of a lot of the work around, the gig economy. But I think that piece around starting from there and kind of growing the business, I think, was really important. So the company, started out as Hourly Nerd, had some small clients, small successes. The founders actually went door to door sort of around Boston trying to get people to sign up for it. And now, 5 years later, they've raised almost $100 million in funding. They've created sort of a technology system that helps match, independent consultants or consultants with companies, as well as actually employees at the company. So if there's someone within your company that maybe has a skill set for a particular project, and you might not be aware of that, they can help sort of provide that match. And so they've grown over time, and they started with these small businesses, but now they serve sort of a large segment of the Fortune 500 population because they've gone along over time and refined that and kind of carved out this niche in the market where, as businesses have grown, they've needed, more and more support from these different types of resources rather than thinking about needing to hire a full-time employee. Could they bring in people to serve this, meet the needs of this project over time?
Are you? How familiar are you? And again, this is probably, I think this came out around the time that you were with him, with Dr. Christensen's jobs to be done theory.
Yeah, absolutely, very familiar. We talked a lot about that.
I think the story with McDonald's is brilliant. And again, as I was rereading that the other day, I forgot about it. As I was rereading that the day after the email came in, like in the middle of the afternoon or something, and I saw that, and they had referenced that, and I was like, boy, I haven't heard that in a while. It's a great example of the McDonald's story, and I immediately started to make references of how that can fit into the world of HR today, of when they're thinking about disruption, or any business, really. So give me your take on it. You probably do a better job at explaining it than I can, for sure. So.
Absolutely. I think that in a lot of ways, the jobs to be done piece is interesting in a variety of different ways. And I think, like, as I think about it in the world of retail, I think oftentimes the job to be done that people think is oftentimes around, I need this particular product, or like I have a particular need in my, let's use apparel, for example, in my wardrobe for a pair of shoes, or and that might be a specific job to be done, and that's ultimately why people go to retail. But I think also, more and more retailers are, for example, discovering that a job to be done is also shopping and entertainment. So it's not only about the product, but it's about that entertainment and that experience piece. So one of the things we think a lot about now as we work with our clients is, how do consumers think about you in relation to either some measure of convenience or some measure, of experience or entertainment. And you're seeing that, across the country as malls kind of rethink their space. I know that there's the American Dream Mall that's opening up in New York, and that particular one, I believe, has now greater square footage dedicated to entertainment than it does to retail. And so I think it really speaks to that jobs to be done piece, which is, people go to the mall to buy product, but they're also going to have some sort of entertainment experience. And so I think that thinking applies to so many different things. And it might be, there's a primary job, there might be a secondary job, but thinking through that and what you're fulfilling for the customer as part of it, I think is important.
And just to give people reference for that, McDonald's, basically, familiar with the burgers, fries, and milkshakes. But when they did a study, they found that the majority of milkshakes were purchased before 8:30 in the morning. And so they wanted to know why, and they were playing with taste and how to deliver the food faster and other things, but it didn't answer the question why. Why would people buy a milkshake at 7 o'clock in the morning or 7:30 in the morning? And as it turned out, and this is where the job that people want done when they buy a milkshake is that if you eat breakfast at 6:30, 7:30 in the morning, you have a bagel, you have a banana, you have something, it's done and it sits there, and then by 10:30 in the morning, you're hungry and you have nothing. Where the milkshake, because it's so thick, I think their statistic is it takes 23 minutes. If you purchase, from the time you buy it, the milkshake, it would take you 23 minutes to sip it through a straw. And they found out that by 10 o'clock in the morning, it softened up a little bit and it was refreshing. It basically quenched the thirst and quenched the hunger that people wanted. And that's why people bought milkshakes at 6:30 in the morning, which they would have never known without tracking that and studying it and learning about it. His reference is the milkshake's a job. Is a job. They're basically I have a job. The milkshake has a job, and the job is to quench thirst and hunger 3 hours after I purchased it.
I'm curious, Carlos, when you look at the retail industry, are there certain consistencies with regard to the people you're meeting with and talking with about what they're paying attention to and how this the retail market is probably one of the most victimized marketplaces as it relates to technology. Are people still holding on to some sort of days of the old, or is everyone pretty much subscribed to we got to figure this out?
Yeah, I think there's been an increasing acknowledgement that the models oftentimes need to evolve and go forward. One of the people that I really admire in this space is Ron Johnson, and he now leads a company called Enjoy Technology. And what they do, they have a really innovative business model where they essentially don't have any stores, actually. So you purchase online, and they have someone come to your door within a matter of hours with that particular product, and it's all electronics. So they come and help you set up the item. They walk you through the installation. So it's a really brilliant model because it essentially sort of captures the human element of retail, knowing that people, maybe will still shop online for certain things, but that human connection is really important. And what I found really interesting about Ron's model is he had this question that he asked, and it was interesting what his take on it was, but he basically said, there's different stakeholders in a company. There's the customer, there's the employee, there might be shareholders. And so his question was essentially, who do you choose to focus on? And for Ron at Enjoy, they choose to focus on the employee because they really believe if you have employees that are, show up as happy, that they're, there and you treat them well, they're going to serve customers really well, which in turn obviously helps drive the business. And I've started to see more and more of that across retail is really that focus on the employee and the experience that's provided for them because of how it translates to customers. And I know, one of the cases that we often look at is Best Buy and that turnaround that occurred there under Hubert Joly. And that was another key piece from him as well, is really investing in people there, getting the right people in both the stores and the leadership positions because of how that translates to the customer. So I think, as we go along, I see that being more and more critical as people think about it. And that's something that I know our clients are thinking about as well, is how do we work with our employees to make sure that what we're doing translates to the customer.
And I got to say, on the HR tech side of things, Carlos, I've often wondered, I've seen some companies shift gears almost to be a service deliverable first that has technology, and there was like this shift in the marketplace within the last 10, 15 years where
companies were just selling software. Here's our software. Thank you very much. Have a good day. Then it turned into let's call it save the client mentality. It wasn't necessarily being proactive with helping them with software, but it was more so than just trying to keep the client from canceling the agreement. And now, to your point, there's almost a increased focus on not just selling software, and it could be HR or finance or maybe even project management, but it's really providing that support to implement it, to turn it on, to set it up, to use it, to that continuous engagement comes on the experience side, not just the product side.
Absolutely. And I think that's critical as well to building those long-term relationships. You can't view it as just a transaction. It has to be more about the relationship that you're building with customers and sort of going beyond that. So whether that's, a B2B business that's selling technology, or whether that's, a B2C business like retail where you have customers, ultimately, so much of it comes down to, what do they think of you? Are they going to come back and shop repeatedly? And I think more and more people understand that. Now, I think the tricky part is, how do you measure that value? How do you know, if you're investing a bunch of money in these types of initiatives and you're going through that, like, how do you understand what that's creating from an impact perspective to the bottom line over the long run? And to be honest, I think it's hard to measure. You sort of have to do that. And I think that's the art piece of management that comes in, is you have to, be able to make those decisions and kind of get a sense that, we may not be able to measure this, we may not understand it, but we believe that it's ultimately leading to the best outcome for the customer and then therefore our business.
Going back to the jobs to be done, and this will lead into basically one of our closing question here. And jobs to be done is, part of when they talked about McDonald's, what they did was they reached out, they surveyed their customers. They asked the customers, what can we do to improve the milkshake? Ultimately, it had no impact on their sales or profit. Sometimes asking your customers what they want isn't necessarily what will either improve your business, improve their experience. It may solve an immediate problem, but it's really not relevant in the long term. And, by your suggestion of going after those low consumption ideas, or Dr. Christensen's suggestion that you do that, you're sort of solving that need. What they can't articulate, or they won't articulate what they need, because nobody ever needed an iPhone. But once it was created, everybody needs an iPhone now. In the HR world, going back to this employee experience, because that's a big buzz right now and an important one, of how do we improve both the candidates and employee experience. If we survey employees, if I'm a business owner, I've got 100, 200, 500, 1,000 employees, and I survey them, they may or may not articulate what that need is that I need to solve. I may not be resolving what the job that, how do I meet that need? When you're working with your retail clients, how do you help them figure out what that low consumption?
Absolutely. So as a specific example, one of the things that I really look at today and sort of admire in the broader retail landscape is Best Buy is actually going after the medical device space and actually monitoring. And if you think about it, it makes a lot of sense because, they're thinking about the customer in terms of the home and electronic devices and sort of the connected home. And so, obviously that means there might be light bulbs, there might be, they sell appliances, they're thinking about TVs, but also you can start getting into sort of the medical device space because all of that kind of connects and is this ecosystem around the customer. And obviously that means, in a lot of ways, there's a lot more regulation. It looks very different, but it makes a lot of sense as well to connect it because you're already serving that customer in sort of an electronic space, and they're providing monitoring and warranties on a bunch of different things. So, I think that's an example of an area where they can think about it as saying, we're going to serve this customer. It might look very different, in terms because it's a medical device, but it leverages sort of our core strength because this is ultimately a job to be done for our customers that we think we can help meet.
So simple and basically brilliant, but basically you got the Geek Squad going out. They're helping people, and it's like, hey, what else can we do for you while we're here today? And who doesn't have some technology problem? So.
Right, but there's more.
Yeah, exactly.
There's more to it though, because it goes back to this idea of innovation and disruption. Because the plan is simple enough, but now I can only imagine, Carlos, what it's like when you sit down and with a bunch of stakeholders and tell them how different they have to look at their future plans. Now we're talking about leading people. We're talking about Ira. What was it that Charlene gave? Was it the Adobe? Right,
oh, yeah.
Where they basically
Adobe, went from selling boxes of software to the cloud.
They went to the cloud, and they had to pretty much tell everybody, Carlos, we're going this way. This is what we're doing, and it seems more and more that people element, whether or not we talk about it from a, for lack of better terms, rank and file engagement to actual leadership development, seems to be the core differentiator of businesses that can make the transaction. Are you seeing something like that?
Definitely. And I would add to it too. I think one of the things that we oftentimes see that becomes difficult for buy-in is, and Clay actually mentions it in several different pieces, is actually the financial incentives. Because companies oftentimes think about the business, the P&L is set for 1 year, essentially, and that's what the managers and the teams are tasked to hit. What is my number for the fiscal year? And oftentimes when we talk about these opportunities, these are longer time horizons. This isn't going to bear this, you're not going to have the same margins on this particular product or service in the first year. It's a 2 to 3 year build. And you have to believe that, and you have to invest in it and move forward. But I think it's oftentimes hard for companies to, for teams to oftentimes see that if they're saying, well, this is what we're told we need to focus on. And I think that's where the role of management and thinking through incentives and, branding and who you bring into these different projects is really important. And Clayton Christensen spent a significant amount of time, I think, talking about that in our classes, that there's all these different systems and pieces at play that oftentimes sort of inhibit companies from doing that because it's a strong, it's not necessarily a disincentive, but it's just not a priority or focus to think 2 to 3 years out. But as you sort of build on those 1 year time horizons and fiscal years, and all of a sudden you get into a place where, the core business has eroded or it's not the same. The last thing I'll add really quickly on this is that I always found this really interesting. He would say that managers always think about a steady state future. So essentially they see what's happening today or tomorrow, and they sort of project the same out into the future, when the reality is it might actually be a declining business into the future. And so, from that perspective, it oftentimes makes sense to go after these opportunities that may be low hanging fruit, but aren't the same margin, because in 2 or 3 years, that might offset your losses if you're in a business that's not growing.
Fascinating.
Carlos, and we held you longer than I said we would, but I really appreciate it. But I got one final question. So let's circle back to how we started the conversation, is about how will you measure your life? How will you measure your life?
Yeah, I actually think a lot about it in terms of how Clay mentioned. One of the things that I'm always doing, I end up traveling a fair amount in my work life, but I always come back to then, when I'm home, what does the time that I have with my wife, my friends, my family look like? And I'm making choices in terms of how I invest my time that sort of aligned to how I want to ultimately measure my life. And so for me, that's always kind of a good check that I'm doing the things that I want to do and sort of building the life that I want. But I think it was a great message to hear from Clay, 5 years ago, because I think it's so important, and you can easily go a lifetime without kind of definitely appreciate him and remembering him, this past week, and just given how many people he impacted in his own life, and the fact that we're talking about it today, I think speaks to that.
Absolutely.
Excellent. You've got a company, the Navio Group.
Absolutely. So we work with retail leaders who want to transform their business. We've worked with companies, such as Target and Whole Foods in the past. And so we have the great privilege of kind of sitting, out in the retail space and working with clients on a hands-on basis, every day. If you're interested in learning more, you're welcome to visit our website. It's thenaviogroup.com, THENAVIO group.com. or email me at carlos@thenaviogroup.com.
Does Navio have some significance? What's Navio?
Yeah, so Navio is the ships that the explorers used back in the day. And so we found that really inspirational because we, in the same way that the explorers were kind of out there kind of mapping a new course for the world, we're out there helping our clients do the same and kind of navigate a new course, especially given all the change that's happening in the industry.
I like it.
Hey, we've been talking with Carlos Castelan from the Navio Group. Very, very helpful. Hey, I could have talked to you all day. I can probably talk to you all day about this stuff. So I really appreciate you being part of this and also basically honoring Dr. Clayton Christensen, certainly the father of disruptive innovation, and his message will go on for a long time. And he lived a wonderful life, just a good man. And so I really appreciate you having some firsthand experience with him, some knowledge, having worked with him, sharing that with our group. So thanks very much. Appreciate it, Carlos.
Yeah, thank you very much for the opportunity, and I'm sure we'll chat again soon. And obviously, really lucky to have been able to be taught by Clay, and wishing his family all the best.
Very, very fortunate. And hey, and thanks so much for sharing the message. Hi everyone, this is Ira Wolf, author of Recruiting in the Age of Googlization. I'm excited to announce that my online course, Recruitment Marketing for the Accidental Recruiter, is open for business. This course is the culmination of a 2-year-long project and releases recruiting tips I've learned after hundreds of hours of research, speaking with thousands of conference attendees, and interviews with dozens of experts. It's all available to you in Recruitment Marketing for the Accidental Recruiter. To receive more information or get started, visit our website at www.successperformancesolutions.com and click on the tab Recruitment Marketing for the Accidental Recruiter. Hey, welcome back everyone to the Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization show. Wow, what an interview. Got to thank Carlos Castelan so much for sharing his experience with Dr. Christensen, Clayton Christensen. And by the way, I'm your host, Ira Wolf, and I'm here with Keith Campagna. Keith, while we were on break, we got a caller, Chris Howard, who also has quite a bit of experience with disruptive innovation. You there, Chris?
I am, Ira. Thank you for taking my call. It's quite an act to follow. Listening to the conversation you just had with Carlos, some very compelling messages.
Yeah, and so I understand you've had some experience as well. I don't know if you've personally met Dr. Christensen, but I think you shared that you had some. You basically, I think you took his course, or you're part of his course in learning about that. And you work in the credit unions. Am I correct?
I work with credit unions. That's right. Yeah. I am with a small company of credit union consultants. And we specialize in credit unions because credit unions are unique. They're cooperatives. There are no stockholders. And so the entire focus and mindset and set of objectives are very different than traditional businesses. And I was fortunate enough to spend a very little bit of time with Clay, but a lot more time with his ideas and with people who had worked with him quite a bit over many years. I got to know the material, and I'd read the books like so many of us of a certain age have, but I got to know the material more intimately, and eventually got to do a little bit of work with Dr. Christensen when he started putting some of his ideas about taking advantage of disruptive opportunity into play with HBX, what is now Harvard Business School Online. He felt that his business was ripe for disruption. And he made that case inside his faculty and inside Harvard Business School. And he created an online course called Disruptive Strategy that my firm took as one of the beta participants. And what we found was an extraordinary experience. The material and Dr. Christensen's approach really made it very accessible, online and through brief lectures and an interactive platform. But we walked away wondering what to do with it. we could take a look at the value proposition we offered our clients and the way we engaged with our clients, and we could apply jobs to be done, and we invested quite a bit in that. But so much of the focus of business is around the primary stakeholder, the stockholder, the owner. And our clients don't have them. They have owners, but owners are customers. Credit union members are both owner and consumer. And we couldn't figure out exactly how to make that transition, how to take this material and make it relevant. And we were able to work with Dr. Christensen and with the folks at then HBX, now HBSO, and build a model that let us do that. And he was incredibly supportive of those efforts. Even though it meant taking some of his learnings and changing the way they were applied, changing the way they were used, the core value that he brought, the notion that consumers have to be the focus of everything, but you can't just go ask them because they can't answer a simple question. People lie by accident, by ignorance, by a desire to make you happy, but you still have to find a way to understand what it is they want and why. That whole basic idea behind jobs to be done that let the methodology that's been developed find fertile ground and grow. And the idea behind disruptive innovation. You know, when I look at Clay's work, what I take away and what my team and my colleagues and I have tried to make available to credit union executives is that Clay wasn't really a business theorist. In many ways, he was more of a business historian. He had a strong streak of curiosity, and he wanted to understand. He wanted to understand why things didn't work, why people went off and did what they were taught at Harvard Business School, and they didn't get the results they were taught to expect. And he built an entire career out of that, and an international following, incredible influence. But where the real value, I think, came from is he was practical. And he took what he learned and he boiled it down into tools that could be applied, concepts that are really actionable and empowering. And I think that has value probably in any industry, and it certainly has value in working inside companies, setting strategic direction, but also aligning that down from the C-suite to the front lines. That's what I got out of working with that material and talking with him and seeing it applied and seeing it work.
So Chris, we just have a few minutes here, but I did have a question. I mean, when you talk about credit unions, obviously, you know, compared to a lot of other industries, not the most I won't say progressive or innovative, but you know, certainly it's in the banking world, finance world, and they've struggled in the past, and especially even with having shareholders, you know, in credit unions, more conservative, I would say. Maybe that's the correct word. So you know, and I love that because we talk to HR, and we're trying to get another very conservative institution and function to change, to innovate, to grow. Is there a specific example, without sharing, you know, any proprietary information? Is there an example of something that one or more of the credit unions did as a result of disruptive innovation?
What a number of credit unions we've worked with have done as a result of taking this course is change their HR management and change their internal training and make a significant effort to ensure alignment between long-term strategic goals and the freedom of frontline employees to do their jobs and to engage with member owners. Remember, it's shareholders in credit unions are conservative because the shareholders are the customers. In a cooperative, everybody has one share. and only one share. And so you vote that share essentially by whether or not you choose to do business and how you do. So opportunity is really found at those front lines. And what we've seen is management that traditionally has been very conservative is far more open to engaging with and listening to and making investments because of the influence of tellers, member service representatives, lenders, people on the front line who interact directly with the market. I mean, that's the single most actionable lesson that I've seen people take away from Clay's
And it's
work.
incredible. It's thank you for sharing that, because Ira, doesn't it just echo with what we keep seeing people say is the challenge they have making change still today? I mean, like, the number one challenge people say is that they don't, executives say they don't trust their leaders, and leaders say they don't think their people can handle change.
I wrote a note down here, and as Chris was sharing about low-hanging fruit, and again, they've been talking about going to the front lines, for as long as you and I have been around. But the reality is that the innovation, going back to what Carlos had said about low consumption, it's not going outside and go, okay, what are we missing? What can we build? What can we innovate? What can we buy? What can we do new? Is that there are employees on the payroll that interface with their customers every single day, or develop products who have all this potential that management overlooks. That's the low consumption idea. That's the low hanging fruit. That's the breakthrough, as far as I can say. Chris, I mean, it sounds like that's exactly what you did, or you helped the credit unions do. Identify that the front line, the bank tellers, the people that interface every day, was that low consumption, or that basically idea of how do we got the people right in front of us. All we need to do is help maximize the potential.
We got the people right in front of us. That's exactly right, Ira. And as we started this conversation, you seemed a little hesitant to call credit unions conservative, but traditionally they are. And the banking business generally is conservative, and credit unions among the most conservative in that broad field. Mm-hmm. And it's because they're cooperative. It's because they're owned by their customers and not by other stockholders, that they want to be careful, and they want to make sure that they're delivering value, and there's not a lot of willingness to take risk. What's great about these ideas, what the whole Christensen oeuvre brings to bear, is that those points of focus, taking care of what matters to in a cooperative, to the member owners and the employees who are among them, really can be empowering. It doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to mean that chance passes you by, that opportunity passes you by. If you understand what I think Clay was trying to teach, it means that you have particular access to the insights and the ideas that can make you stand out in the marketplace, because Chris, you're working directly with the people who have a need.
Yeah. Hey, Chris, I hate to cut you off, but we're really approaching toward the end of the show. And again, just like I said at the end of Carlos, we can talk to you for a long time. So hopefully we can get you back for an extended conversation and learn a little bit more. How can someone get in touch with you, Chris? What's the best way? What's your company?
C. Howard at Callahan.com.
That's easy enough.
Yeah, easy enough. Thank you so much for the chance to chat with you.
Hey, thanks for sharing your experience. Very, very invaluable. And again, if the credit unions can do it, cooperatives, very conservative groups, HR can certainly do it, Keith.
Oh, absolutely. Well,
a lot to be learned. Crazy parallels.
Yeah, I think an organization can absolutely do it. I think that HR shouldn't be the captain of the squad.
Right, and again, and they're absolutely. So speechless, and we're almost out of time. So I want to thank everybody for listening to the Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization show. Today was just outstanding, very insightful. Keith and I, as you heard, we just kind of laid back for most of it, and so it was great for us learning. Hopefully for everyone else as well. And thanks for joining in. Hopefully you'll share some comments or share the show. We'll be posting this on LinkedIn and Twitter. We don't forget to join Googlization Nation. And you can go to googlizationnation.com and you'll get notices of this and other shows that are upcoming. We got a lot of great guests in the month of February. Hard to believe we're at the end of January already. Let's see. Thanks to Zor.ai and Success Performance Solutions, again, for being our sponsors. Until next week, this is Ira Wolf and Keith Campagna on Geeks, Geezers, Googlization. Go out and join googlizationnation.com. We will see you a week from today. Don't let the shift hit your plans.